just going to explain the build, and then I'll show some gameplay, and then show how it performs against Lilith, right? Alright, so on the helmet, you're going to want Tusk Helm of Jorts the Mighty. What this does is, while we're in Berserking, it just gives us additional damage. It gives us extra fury, and it gives us cooldown reduction. On the chest, you just want a normal chest piece with disobedience. On the gauntlets, you're gonna want the weapon master's aspect, right? Now, the reason why we have this aspect, right, is to give Death Blow an additional charge, right? And I'll explain that after I go over the rest of the armor. For the legs, you're gonna want to Bolt's Will. This makes it so that anytime we go into Unstoppable, we get Fury, and we also get additional damage. On the boots, you're just going to want Ghost Walkers. For the two-handed mace, you're going with Overkill. And again, I'll explain this in a sec. For the two one-handers, right, you want to go two maces. And the reason why you want to go two maces is because it has overpower. In the stats you're going to want for all these weapons, I mean, you obviously can't get it for the unique, right? But you're going to want all stats, strength, and then you're going to want overpower, and you're going to want damage to berserking. The reason why you want damage to berserking is if I go to the Paragon board here, there is a glyph right here, Blood Rage, right? Your damage is increased by 25% of your damage while berserking bonus. So the more berserking you have, the more damage you'll do, right? And so that's the reason why you want to stack that. So for the first mace, you're gonna want the Ancestral Force aspect. This just buffs our Hammer of the Ancients, and it also makes it quake outwards, so it gives it a kind of AoE effect. On the second one-hander mace, you would go with Encroaching Wrath aspect. What this does is this buffs our overkill, and again, I'll explain that in a sec, but this is important. On the second two-hander, you're going to go with Earth Striker's aspect. This makes it so that after swapping weapons 8 times, your next skill will overpower and deal increased overpower damage. For the amulet, you're going to want Tabalt's Will. And for the two rings, you're going to want Unrelenting Fury and Bold Chieftains, right? And the perks that I think are the best for the rings would be Crit Chance, Damage while berserking, Max Life, and Resource Generation. I think those are the best perks you can have. And then we'll go over to Vampiric powers. You're going to want Prey on the Weak. This is so that whenever you curse things with Metamorphosis, they become vulnerable, and they stay permanently vulnerable. Blood Boil is an additional overpower. Sanguine Brace is so we have a reliable Fortify, and we also get the Crit Chance. Now, for Ravenous, right, this is up to you. You can either go Ravenous or Undying. I would say the less challenging content, you probably want to go Ravenous, but the harder the content, you want to go Undying. Even though this build only has about 8,000 armor, I think is the max you can get, right? It actually held up pretty well in like tier 90, tier 100s, right? I was actually pretty surprised. And I'll show gameplay of that, right? But yeah, it's kind of just like a preference thing. If you want more attack speed, then go with Ravenous. But if you want extra heals, go with Undying, right? Let's just go over the skill tree real quick. So you're gonna start with Lunging Strike, but as you can see on the skill bar, we actually don't use Lunging Strike, and I'm gonna explain that in a sec. Then you're gonna go Hammer of the Ancients, right? And you're gonna make sure you pick the Furious Hammer of the Ancients. What this does is, for the more fury you have, the more damage it does, right? And because we have this aspect right here, the Unrelenting Fury, it makes it very easy to have full fury. Like, you don't have to worry about not having full fury. Plus, we have Tabalt's Will, so that is the reason why we're going to choose that, right? You're going to want to pick up Imposing Presence for the additional life. You want to have as much life as possible, which is also the reason why on this challenging shout we have the 20% bonus max life. The way overpower works is the more max life and fortify you have, the more additional damage it does. So that's why max life is very important here. Then you have rallying cry. This just gives us more movement speed and resource generation, and unstoppable. Challenging shout is your damage reduction on enemies. You typically would pop this if there's like a group of elites, and you think you're gonna have trouble on them. You would just pop this. War cry is just an additional damage bonus, and it also gives us berserking. Booming voice just extends the duration of our shouts, and raid leader just heals us while we have our shouts active, right? Aggressive resistance gives us damage reduction while berserking. Prolific fury, while berserking, fury regeneration is increased. And because we have death blow, we're actually going to have 100% uptime of berserking, right? We have pit fighter for the increased damage to close enemies. Slaying strike, this is just nice for executing enemies. Now death blow, this is what I really want to talk about, right? So the way death blow works is if you kill an enemy, the charge is refunded. And remember, we have 2 charges of death blow, right? It does increase damage to bosses, and so because of this, death blow actually hits just as hard as Hammer of the Ancients does against bosses, and I'm going to show that against Lilith, right? But the main perk here is if death blow damages at least 1 enemy, you gain berserking for 3 seconds, right? And so because of this, the way this build works is essentially because we have this aspect right here, after swapping weapons 8 times, your next skill will overpower. We just are constantly swapping between death blow and Hammer of the Ancients. And so whichever one procs the overpower, they're each just doing a ton of damage, right? And because we have this shockwave on Deathblow, and now it gives it more range, which gives it a higher chance of hitting more enemies and a higher chance of killing more enemies. And so now we're constantly in berserking, getting all the benefits from berserking. And yeah, I mean, that's it really. For a wallop, this is just increased damage with bludgeoning weapons. Then you have brute force. This just gives us increased overpower damage. Then you're gonna have Wrath of the Berserker. This is just our ultimate, and then you're gonna go Unbridled Rage, right? And yeah, that's it. Okay, so one other thing that I want to touch on real quick is the way the expertise system works, right? So essentially, the way this works is you get bonuses on depending on the weapon type that you use, right? And it gives you an option to essentially core one of these techniques, right? So when you core it, you don't need to be using the weapon to get the top bonus, right? So for example, for the two-handed axe expertise, we're going to core this one, so that way we get the increased damage to vulnerable enemies. And so that first perk, we always get no matter what weapon we use. And then for the other perks, we only get them when we use that weapon, right? So for example, for the one-handed mace, even though we have a one-handed mace, this perk, I don't think this perk applies to us, right? And then another thing, right? You can also, when you go to your abilities, you can also change. It gives you an option to select what weapon you want to use for each for the abilities. Like for this one, you have to use a mace, but for Deathblow, you could use an axe. You could use dual wield. You could go bludgeoning weapon, or you can go slashing weapon. This is important because you want to use a slashing weapon, and the reason why is because if you use anything else, let's say you use the same overkill, the same thing as this one, you won't be getting this perk to proc because you have to swap weapons, and so this doesn't count as you swapping weapons. So you just want to make sure you have it on the you just want to make sure you have it on the axe. That's what I put it on. And yeah, essentially the way this build works is, right, I mean, it's very straightforward, right? You're just gonna pop your shouts, and all you want to be doing is you want to be swapping between Deathblow and Hammer of the Ancients, right? You're gonna be swapping so that you can get the bonus where every time you swap weapons 8 times, one of your skills overpower. And like I said, because they both do so much damage, it doesn't matter which one you proc, right? And again, the reason why we use overkill is because it makes Deathblow have a shockwave, so it guarantees us to hit more enemies, right? And it keeps us in berserking, right? Because it does so much damage, it can easily kill enemies, which is important because when Deathblow isn't up, now you lose a source of berserking, and now you're not guaranteed that 100% uptime of berserking, right? Um, you you kind of want to stagger your rallying cry, um, not your rallying cry, sorry, your war cry with your Wrath of the Berserker. That way you can stay in berserking. I mean, again, you really shouldn't have a problem staying in berserking as long as you're swapping between Deathblow and Hammer of the Ancients. And then once you're in your like alt or you're using war cry, you don't have to use overkill. I mean, not overkill, sorry. You don't have to use Deathblow, but you can. It still does a ton of damage, so it's up to you, right? And yeah, outside of that, I mean, it's very, very straightforward, right? Like I said, this is a tier 98, and I was very, very surprised at how well it performed, even with such little armor, right? Like there will be times. I think there's like one time here where I almost die, right? But I mean, I was very surprised at how tanky it was with such little armor. And I think part of that is because of the aggressive resistance perk where you get damage reduction while in berserking. So that's why it's also important that we stay in berserking, right? Okay, and now on this boss fight, I just wanted to show you, I actually messed up on my rotation here. And even as I messed up, you have Death Blow in your back pocket. And so when you use Death Blow, it still does an insane amount of damage to where it really doesn't matter, right? Oh. And for Lilith, right? I actually wanted to show you, it doesn't matter whether or not you use Death Blow or you use Hammer of the Ancients, right? So here, I'm using Death Blow. So I pop all my shouts and I pop my ult and I pop Death Blow and she's dead, right? One shot and she's dead. And then in the next clip, right, same exact thing. You pop all your shouts and then you pop Hammer of the Ancients one time and she's dead. You know, in these clips, Deathblow did 29 million and Hammer of the Ancients did 30. So like I said, it really doesn't matter which one you use. They're both doing the same amount of damage. And yeah, I mean, that's it. There's not really much to talk about with this build. Um, it's a lot of fun. Like I said, it is a little squishy, but as long as you play right, you'll be fine. And yeah, I mean, that's about it. I'll just let it play out. Peace.